everybody. Welcome to another edition of Rock and Roll Confessional. I'm Rita Weil.
I am C.W. West, and we thank you for tuning in again. First off, we're going to start with a few thank yous to everyone on Patreon, located at Patreon.com/RARC podcast. That's Rock and Roll Confessional podcast, including all the groupies, the roadies, and the rock stars that have made a pledge. I want to thank you very much. And for as little as $1 a month, you can join and help guide us through our shows. Also, thanks to those people that subscribed to Rock and Roll Confessional on iTunes, who rated it, who left a beautiful review. Want to thank you very, very much.
Like
we appreciate it.
Who left one?
So I wanted to read one. Thanks for asking, Reitz. I'm glad you're reading the script.
What script?
Well, the one here from Siegfried F. said, way to go. Just caught your first episode off Apple's suggestion from another show I really like. Y'all's, I love that part, Y'all's Radio Experience shows, and I'm looking forward to more pulling back the curtains on all things rock and roll. Thank you very much, Siegfried F. You can always check out our website at rockandrollconfessional.rocks, rockandrollconfessional.rocks. And if you like, go to the support page to find out how you can become a Patreon rock star. We appreciate it. So, Reitz,
Yo.
who we got on this show?
Today, we're going to speak with one of the founding members of Dramarama. He is also the lead singer, John Easdale. John was kind enough to drop by our studio to talk about the history of the band, the breakup and the reforming of the band, how drugs played a part in his life, and his love of music. Dramarama has been around since the mid-'80s and has had such hits as Last Cigarette, Wonderamaland, Haven't Got a Clue, I love that song, Everybody Dies, Scenario, and the biggest that is still being played everywhere, Anything, Anything. If you haven't heard of Dramarama, stay tuned to this podcast. You'll learn so much more that your head may just come close to exploding. So now, please keep your arms and legs inside the vehicle at all time. And here we go with another episode of Rock and Roll Confessional featuring John Easdale of Dramarama. Well, here we are at Rock and Roll Confessional. I'm Rita Weil, along with C.W. West.
I'm
and
here.
Our special guest today is John Easdale of Dramarama.
Hello, John.
Bless me, for I have sinned.
You too, huh?
Yeah.
What's the biggest sin you've ever done?
Oh, I'm married to a woman, but we didn't get married in the church. So, I've lived in, we've been living in sin now for 30 years.
Oh my God.
When I was struggling years ago, I went to go talk to the priest about it. And he said, well, did you get married in the church? He said, no. He's like, well, I can't talk to you about it then because you're not married. Unless you're living as brother and sister, you're
Which
sinning.
could be worse off.
You're sinning. Yeah. Yeah. So I didn't get married in the church. And so I've been living in sin for coming up on 30 years in August.
Did you have a religious upbringing?
Yeah. As they say, a recovering Catholic.
Okay. Sorry.
Yeah.
So that kind of stuff, it sticks in your brain. Now, I know you're originally from Jersey, too, and the Catholic Church, and reading a lot of, like Springsteen stuff. I'm a Springsteen freak. But, it's just how much ingrained the Catholic Church was in him. That comes through in his writing now. You can see all that. And do you kind of experience that as well? And
I would say so. I at one point in my young life, I was an altar boy and entertained thoughts of becoming a priest or whatever. But then as my adolescence bloomed, I didn't think I could handle the celibacy. So I moved away from that. But
Springsteen did too.
It was, I believed strongly and wholeheartedly up to a certain point, and then some of the things I was doing was wrong, according to the church. So, you can't masturbate, you can't, there's so many things you can't do. I didn't necessarily agree with it. So I stopped, I kind of, as I got older, I moved away from it, and
but still, it's still kind of ingrained in your system.
Absolutely,
and,
it's
your everyday life.
Like I said, recovering.
Yeah,
still there.
It's always recovering.
It's like life. We were talking earlier about sometimes you just learn stuff and then you have to unlearn stuff. And it's like, okay, to make it be able to live with what you believe in, what you're comfortable with. If we go back a little bit further too, like how long were you in Jersey?
Until I was 25 years old.
Okay, so you were born and raised there?
I was born in just over the border in Chester, Pennsylvania, and grew up in New Jersey.
Yeah. Now, speaking of New Jersey and stuff, where you were from, it's Wayne, New Jersey?
Wayne, New Jersey, about 15 miles outside New York City.
Okay, so you're more influenced by New York than by Philly, probably.
Yeah.
So, like, it's I try to isolate some of the music from New Jersey, and you've got like the Springsteen, the Bon Jovi, and then like some of the other stuff. But there's always a lot of organ in that, or accordion, or something. At least in Springsteen's live stuff, I know. So. But your stuff has always been more New Yorkish, I would say.
Guitars, yeah.
Yeah.
New York radio was pretty mainstream. They played a lot of Bruce Springsteen, played a lot of Billy Joel. Meatloaf was big, and whatever was popular, mainstream was popular on New York. New York didn't have a real like underground radio station. They did have, obviously a strong underground with CBGB and
oh God, yeah,
all the cool rock bands that came out, but never really sold a lot of records, but made their mark in other ways. New York Dolls and the Ramones
Stooges,
and Blondie was the only one that really did well, that really sold records. I don't think any of the other CBGB's records or CBGB's bands really ever, Talking Heads to a certain extent, maybe, but
kind of a cult following those still.
Yeah. And being close to the city, you heard about this stuff and you knew about this stuff. And if you were like me and you read every magazine and newspaper, you knew about this stuff, but it wasn't mainstream.
What was the band or the song that Little John used to listen to on the radio and go, whoa?
I don't know. I started when I was really little. I mean, rock and roll caught up with me when I was 4 or 5 with the Monkees and then the Beatles, and followed by the Who and the Stones and stuff like that. It was backwards because the Monkees were perfect for 5-year-olds, and I guess if you were a couple of years younger, then it would have been the Archies.
Right.
Yeah, grew up on AM radio and which played everything,
in those days, like Supremes and Temptations.
Yeah, everything. Bubblegum and as well as rock. But
the short rock version, I think, which is what Rita and I talked about before, like the Light My Fire was the 2-minute.
2-minute version, yeah. Was it WABC that was the big rock or the big AM station that
Cousin Brucey and his buddies? Yeah.
And then probably 70s you got like Allison Steele, the Nightbird, and
there was a station called there was a station, it was 95.5 out there.
WPLJ.
WPLJ was a rock station, and the WNEW as well were the two main rock stations. They didn't play a lot of underground music or punk rock or stuff like that. That was more to my liking, but it wasn't on the radio. You had to go find it at the record store or go into New York and find a record store to buy the 45s.
Who are some of your favorite artists? Like even to this day that you go listen to and you go, I remember exactly where I heard that first.
Yeah, Bowie and Ian Hunter and Mott the Hoople and T-Rex, I think, transformed me at a certain point in my teens. I mean, whereas I still loved all kinds of rock and roll and typical teenager, whatever was popular with my peers was popular with me. But then when I heard those, I guess they called it glam at the time, although that was before the Los Angeles glam movement.
Right.
But when I heard that stuff, that transformed me. And Lou Reed kind of snuck in with that because Bowie produced Transformer. And so he was, I guess, considered glam, even though he was the furthest thing from it. But he was also in that pantheon of my favorites before punk rock came along. And that changed everything once again,
When did you first put together a band? There was a couple different names, right? Wasn't there DPW?
Oh, the Department of Public Works was a teenage band, which we called it that because a couple of the guys actually worked for the Wayne Township Department of Public Works, and we could get the uniform. So we all wore the Department of Public Works.
On the weekends?
It was just a T-shirt that had a little emblem on it. So we got a bunch of those T-shirts, and we all dressed like that. And that was kind of like a high school band or maybe straight out of high school. And we did that, and... yeah, we had a band called The Fucks, which was FUXX.
Yeah.
And
you got a lot of airplay, huh?
No, it was before we went in the studio, and it was mostly covers. And then at some point, I think we realized we could write our own songs, and there were some bands that were putting out 45s of their own. So we decided to do that. We actually, our bass player who has a radio show on KLOS, Chris Carter, he owned a record store with a friend of ours named Tommy Mulaney, and they sold. They had all the cool music. He was a Bowie, Mott the Hoople kind of aficionado as well, and so they tried to have like a New York City style music store in Wayne, New Jersey, which didn't really work commercially or financially. There wasn't enough of an audience or people buying, and it was a record store, but like at the time, say Kenny Rogers' Greatest Hits was, the number one record, we wouldn't carry that because we were too cool to have though. I can't tell you how many people came in at Christmas time looking for Kenny Rogers' Greatest Hits.
You could
go to Harmony,
Sears,
Sears, wherever they had records for sale. But no, not Sam Goody's, whatever. But we were too cool for school. We sold import 45s and independent bands 45s and import albums, and it was 79 to 82 that the store was in business, and we started the band in the basement of the record store.
Now, since you had that experience with the record store and so forth, obviously you probably were interested in getting a big contract. I think every band wants to do that to be able to make a living. But since you had that groundswell, how did you guys go about getting your music played?
Well, honestly, I don't think we thought in terms of contracts or anything, because at the time, like I said, the radio stations didn't play that kind of music, at least the radio stations we heard in New York, in the tri-state area, they called it. It wasn't a goal of, so we decided to go in the studio and spend our money and make our own 45, just kind of do our own thing. It wasn't, try to get on, I guess, college radio or something like that. And we ended up getting reviewed in a magazine called The Trouser Press with our first 45 that we made. And that ended up being read by a DJ in France who started playing our record in France. And then that led to a contract with a French label to make our first album. So that was our way into the music business and to somebody else besides ourselves putting out our records. We put out a single and a 12-inch EP, and then that led to an album on a French label called New Rose. And then that led to a DJ in Los Angeles named Rodney Bingenheimer playing it on his weekend shows. And then the song called Anything leaped from there, or leapt, however you say that.
It kicked ass, it blasted it.
Yeah, it went into regular rotation on the radio station, and we moved out here in '86. The summer they started playing it on the radio, and we were shocked and surprised and delighted to find that we were on the radio every day, all day, every day. And we kind of came out for vacation, but just ended up staying.
Yeah. When was that song actually released then? So if they started playing it in '86, so it'd been out for a while?
Came out in November of 1985. The French LP came out, and about a year later, we put it out on our own label here in Los Angeles.
I'm just curious, was it to be distributed just in France with the French label calling you, or are they going to sell it all over Europe?
I think it was, there were imports, and New Rose Records was a label that signed a lot of expatriate American artists. Like they put out the Cramps, and they put out Johnny Thunders records, and underground, guys who didn't really sell a lot of records in America. So the album was available as an import, and that's where Rodney picked it up at a record store called Poohbah's, which was in Pasadena.
Oh yeah,
remember Poohbah's?
Yeah.
And he bought it because of the cover. He didn't know who we were, and thought we were actually, I think the first few times he talked it back on the radio, he thought we were from France, because there was nothing really on the...
The French are so dramatic.
We were trying hard back then. We were trying to get noticed, but not necessarily trying to get signed until we moved here. And then when we were on the radio, then we started getting people from record labels like come sniffing around. But I don't think we really weren't that good as a live band. So
back then.
Yeah, no. Yeah, at the time, we were still very, very amateurish, I would say.
But were most bands at that time like kind of raw? You didn't really care, so it's just like, you go out on the stage and you just play, and sometimes it's a different set. Probably most nights it's a different set, different way that you play songs and stuff like that. You didn't have the stage presence down, but it wasn't so much about the stage presence as it was about the music, right?
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I don't know what was wrong. I don't know what about us wasn't there, but it wasn't there. We had every A&R guy in at our first few shows that we played in LA, because like I said, we were on the radio. That song was huge, a bona fide hit.
No.
And we just couldn't make any kind of a deal. We also were kind of arrogant, we're like, oh, look, we do our own thing, and we're, it's about us. And it was already set in stone what we were doing and how we were doing it. And we knew better than anybody at any label. Sure. We were,
And plus, look at how many bands kind of just popped up at that time.
Well, too, you had MTV, which was changing everything, and the music
and directing a lot of it.
Exactly, and the music industry itself had changed, and then you were talking about college radio, and then you got independents, like a band on independence label like REM, and it's like people are going, wait, there was just a plethora of material.
We were still young, and I think we were just not there yet. Certainly as a live act. I think we had spent so much time concentrating on the studio and making records that we hadn't really honed our live show, and we didn't have any chops, to use a word that I don't really know what it means, but we just weren't there. And so we didn't get signed until our third album, and even that was a small deal with a label called Chameleon, which was at the time distributed by EMI, and that album had the song Last Cigarette that kind of did well nationally, but it took us 3 albums in 4 years or whatever it was.
Where did the second album come from?
We just put it out ourselves, and on the French label as well.
And on the French label, okay. Mm-hmm. So the first 2 kind of came out on the French label.
Yes.
How did Edie Sedgwick, how was that the chosen it girl for the album cover?
Trying to do anything we could to get noticed, and we stole that photograph out of a book, and we were going for the Andy Warhol thing, and we did a Bowie song, and we did a Velvet Underground song. Being the music fans that we were, we knew every Bowie cover. If someone did a Bowie song, we knew it. If someone did a T-Rex song, we knew it. If someone did a Lou Reed song, we knew it. So we thought it was a way to get people to notice us, was to do a Bowie song or to do a Velvet song. On our second album, we did a Patti Smith song. Mm-hmm. We were just trying to get people to notice us.
I was looking at some of the cover tunes that you've done, including Jim Carroll, Memo from Turner with Mick Jagger, Lou Reed.
Mick Taylor on guitar on that one.
Right.
Well, he's on that album. He's not on. He refused to play on that song.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, he's like, I've done that already, which I guess made sense. But he played on a couple of songs on that album.
But I think what's really interesting is, like, a lot of the songs, Patti Smith, Bowie, Alice Cooper, Bee Gees, Mott the Hoople, they're not the well-known songs that I think a lot of bands would normally record to try to just get another hit of their version of it. I think it seems like it's really like a deep cut that it's really meaningful to you and to the band to,
absolutely,
to record those.
Yeah, we never went for the hit songs.
It was the love of the music and the love of the band.
Hopefully that comes through. We were all big, music geeks, so to speak. We cared more about B-sides and the obscure stuff. It wasn't about what was
top 40.
Popular.
Yeah.
It's like you go to a show and it's like, don't play the freaking hits, man. Give me something off the album, deeper cuts.
Yeah.
What was it like touring in those days? You had a little bit of notoriety. Was it something that you had a record company that was maybe paying you a little bit for touring, or was that stuff that you just took on yourself?
Well, at first we did everything ourselves, and so subsequently we didn't go very many places. First couple albums, we played a lot in California, but there weren't a lot of radio stations that were playing that kind of music to begin with, much less playing independent records. But, alternative music, as they say, or modern rock, didn't really take off until the early 90s when Nirvana and Pearl Jam and that came along. So we weren't in a lot of places until like 89 when Last Cigarette got a little bit more radio play. And that was when we started going around and having a record company give us money to help us pay to go out and lose money touring.
Did you have t-shirts T-shirts and stuff like that you could sell?
Yeah. We made T-shirts, and we did a lot of it ourselves. We weren't part of the corporate rock thing until Chameleon ended up getting sold
to Elektra, wasn't it?
Yeah, and moved to Elektra, and it was basically sold to this guy who dropped all the other bands on the label except us and moved it over to Elektra, to Warner Music, and that's when we went from spending thousands to spending four figures on an album to spending like six figures on an album.
And that was a vinyl, right?
Yeah, yeah, and that's when we were able to.
Which was a great album.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That was when we were able to hire top-rated talent and get guys like Ben Montench and Mick Taylor and hire some really good players to come in and help us, and hire a producer, a guy named Don Smith, who had been an engineer on Tom Petty's records and on Keith Richards' records. And he was, hire some pros, gosh, spend a lot more money than we ever had before, but that's the way he did it, that's the way music was. And I don't know that you need to spend that much money, but it was nice to spend that much money. I mean, we were lucky to get that chance, and it did pretty well. But of course, unfortunately, we were, again, arrogant to a certain degree, and we knew more than the record company knew. And we were smarter about things, and we had no problem telling them they were stupid, and why are you picking that song for a single, and why aren't you doing this, and why aren't you doing that? We were very much loudmouths, and we knew better, or we thought we did, which is not a good. I don't recommend it for any up and coming.
Now
band.
you can look back and say that.
Oh God, yeah. We were very outspoken, and I would say that was our downfall in terms of working with the major labels, because we were doing well. We were on the radio, but at one point we did an interview with a magazine and with a newspaper. We did an interview, and after the so-called interview was over, we were still talking on the phone and started saying all these terrible things about the record company, about how they were doing all the bad things, and that ended up being the article.
Oh no!
And so all of our backing and all, we were on Letterman one week, and then the next week we were gone. They weren't spending another penny on us.
Wow,
because we were stupid. We were arrogant jerks.
You were a band.
Yeah, but we didn't grow. We didn't come up in the studio in the major label sense of being put together by an A&R team and learning the hard way. We learned the hard way.
Weaned into the system,
in the business.
Yeah. We had too much independence, and
a lot of times though, that stuff like that just depends on luck, because there are other bands that had that attitude and still got through.
Yeah, I guess
but maybe they weren't. Maybe they it's all fluff talk that they said this and that and fuck you to the labels.
A lot of times it's manufactured. A lot of times it's like what they put out is what they showbiz is showbiz, and it's a lot of smoke and mirrors and a lot of things that they want you to hear. It's all Marilyn Manson, for instance, at his peak, there's no way he could be that drugged out and still be able to perform every night, and do that level of artistry that he did. You just couldn't do it.
I had people from the label telling me, they're really into what they're believing. They're really like cultish. Don't even go backstage. You don't want to know what's going on.
Yeah, exactly. And you build that illusion, it's like some of the rappers there, or hip hop artists, they're thugs, they're gangsters, and in some cases it's true. There's some guys in posse or whatever they call it now, packing heat. Some of them come from the streets, but some of it is manufactured.
But some of it, when you see what P. Diddy's worth and what Jay-Z's worth, and it's like,
sakes, yeah,
they're nothing but street, man, nothing but street.
With a lot of people behind him.
But then Snoop he's from Long Beach, and he came from where he came from, and NWA, same thing. They came from where they came from. Now things change, and Ice Cube's a movie producer, and Dr. Dre's a mogul, but those guys were from Compton.
Yeah.
They really were from Compton, and at first they were They were the real deal, whereas Ice-T, when he was doing his Cop Killer and stuff, he had come up, he'd written raps for Mr. T and other things, he wasn't
Even the T's in the family.
Yeah, no, he was mean. He was he wasn't as street, I guess, as they sold him as.
One interesting thing I found in doing some research about you is you had the great career music-wise, which you still play a lot live and you still write. But there was a time when you worked for the Album Network.
Yes.
Which was a trade publication.
Yes.
What was that about? Was that something that they were trying to tap into your, what you knew about stuff, or was it just really going full-on business into the...
Well, the band broke up in 94, I want to say. And in 95, I was called by the people at the Album Network to come produce a radio show that they were putting together called Rotten Day that starred John Lydon. And it was a 2 or 3 minute rundown of the day's history in rock, today in rock history. It was kind of comical, and it was hosted by Johnny Rotten. Mr. Lydon would say funny things about what happened that day, and they needed someone who could go in and not be intimidated by him as a producer. So they tapped me as a producer. A friend of mine worked over there and said, would you like to try to do this? And I was like, sure, I'll try anything. And I was basically unemployable, as a singer in a rock and roll band. It's not a good resume builder. So I got that job. And then after a year or two of doing that, the radio show was going away. The Sex Pistols were getting back together, and I started working for the magazine basically as an editor, which I had no experience or education, but I've always been an avid reader, and I needed to punch up my punctuation skills. But yeah, I was lucky to support my family through the 90s and the early 2000s until about 2003, when the bottom fell out of the trade magazine market. The company was bought by Clear Channel.
And is that when VH1 comes knocking on the door?
Yeah, it was pretty much right after that that they came knocking on the door, so that was advantageous. And I wasn't doing anything else at the time, so it was like, let's get the band back together, and we did.
How did that show come about for you guys? I mean, was it contrived?
No, they showed up.
Seriously?
Out of the blue. I was sitting
When I watched it again last night, you looked very surprised, and either that's great acting or you were surprised.
No, I knew. I was waiting for a phone call. I knew I was going to get a phone call because they were doing other shows, and VH1 was going to call me on the telephone, and they wanted me to do some background about something else. So
supposedly.
Yeah. So I was sitting waiting for a phone call, and all of a sudden I was sitting in my garage with my shirt off, and I had no idea.
I can't talk until my shirt's on.
I said that, and I made them do it over. I was like, this is totally uncool, and I think that's the scene they show. Me, because I was embarrassed, but at the same time, I couldn't say no. Of course, I was delighted to get the band back together and get back into it.
Back up. What was the cause for the breakup in the first place?
There had been, I think, earlier when the band was together. I honest to God, after we pissed off the label so much that they dropped us, we were more of an 80s band or an early 90s band. And after Pearl Jam and Nirvana and that blew up, the bands from before that explosion weren't really, we were playing rock and we were up there, but nobody really was interested in, we were old, at the time, we were 5 years back. And it just wasn't happening. And personally, it wasn't happening. Like anything, you get sick of each other. So there was no anger or bad blood, really. It was just kind of like, it had run its course, and we were kind of like, eh. And I did have a drug problem, but I was addressing it. I went to rehab in 93, and we stayed together for another year or so. It wasn't the drugs. I don't think that, it contributed, I'm sure. And the problem with going to rehab and getting sober is when everybody else doesn't.
Right.
It causes friction.
Absolutely.
And whether it's the friction of getting drawn back in and relapsing, or the friction of trying not to, being on a bus with a bunch of guys who are still drinking and drugging, and you're trying not to, it's a struggle.
What was your drug or drink of choice, sir?
Oh, yeah, no. I like to smoke cocaine, or we called it crack, but yeah, I was all
very
into
addicting. And easy to get.
Ridiculously so. Yeah. And after a lifetime of dabbling and being a weekend warrior, or just not never a 24/7 kind of a person, that turned me into a raging addict. It had been for years. I would go on the road and party, and then come home and not party, and I was raising a family, and at some point I went on the road, and then I came home and kept going. And that was when problems really, when I became aware that it was a problem.
It's, extremely tough when you're trying to, I guess, get sober and you're around people that aren't. I mean, and then it's like you're trying to do your best, but you're still all eating together and, working together. I remember the story that David Lee Roth told, backstage Van Halen. It was just like, you see each other, you see each other more than family. And all of a sudden somebody was eating, and David just looked at the person and said, "I hate the way you chew." Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And just something like that, normal people don't see. I mean, they might see it in their own families, but stuff like that just gets under the skin and creates all sorts of tension. And you've got to...
When you're traveling, you're together.
Yeah.
I mean, especially if it's on a bus. You've got how many people, 5 or 6 people sleeping on a bus?
Uh-huh. Or more than that, because you have roadies and
girlfriends, and
not so much girlfriends, but the road manager and the technicians and the sound man and the light person. So there's like probably 10 or 12 people sleeping on a bus.
Not a lot of room.
But the problem, I don't mean to give the impression that everybody else was still smoking crack, because they weren't. Yeah. None of them were. But
it's just
when you
all
get
around
sober, you got to stop everything. So even a beer is so everybody was still drinking beer and smoking weed, and I couldn't deal. Yeah.
That you're trying to stay away from. So
and then you drink a few beers, and then anything sounds like a good idea.
Do you still go out on the road a lot and play?
We're more like weekend warriors.
Okay.
Next week we're going to, actually tomorrow I'm leaving. We're going to New Jersey for a Dramarama show, and then we also do these 80s shows. Where it's like, kind of like what the Turtles do with their 60s show.
Happy Together.
Yeah. But now it's the 80s is nostalgia. It's an oldies show. And we do those, and we play with like 7 other bands and do 15 minutes. We're doing that in Coney Island on
cool.
Friday night. And then we're in Colorado, and we're doing it.
Vegas.
We're in Vegas. We're not doing that many this year. Last year we did a few more. It depends from year to year how many you get, but yeah, we've done a number of those types of shows.
Do you know the other bands?
You get to know them, but no,
I didn't know if they were people that you had gotten to know in the 80s and 90s.
No.
Or this is kind of the first time, even though all your music was at the same time, this is kind of the first time that you're hanging out or seeing them or meeting them? Or...
Yeah, you meet them backstage. For the most part, everybody's really nice, and everybody's really happy to be to be out there doing anything. A lot of times it's the only way. The band's been back together for 15 years, 16 years, but the only way we get to go to Denver, Colorado is under those circumstances.
But that's not a bad way to go.
No, it keeps you in, people's minds, it's a way to remind people or in some cases, introduce people. Cause like I said, those cities might not have had modern rock radio in the 80s when we were in our heyday. So
looking back at that time touring right now as compared to like 15, 20 years ago, what are the biggest differences? Are there like AA meetings backstage? Or, it's, vegan.
No, I keep that private. Okay. That's more.
Because I know some bands that do that out on the road.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Well, I think, in a lot of the cases, the whole band is sober. I know a friend of mine who's since passed used to be like Aerosmith's sponsor, and he would help them, and they would do band meetings / AA meetings together.
Which is helpful.
And he was sobriety to the stars kind of a guy.
Yeah. Well, it's important that, at least that, if they don't have it for people that, and what with the internet, you've got so much communicate. You can find out exactly where a meeting is, if you need a meeting.
Yeah, but there's those Hollywood Hills kind of meetings where it's Ringo and Joe Walsh and a couple of the, just, they go to people's houses and stuff because it wouldn't do for them to just show up at the church. When I first got sober, I needed to do my 90 and 90. We went to meetings anywhere and everywhere.
Yeah.
Every town we went to, we went and looked for a meeting, and it wasn't always the most perfect kind of place to be, but it was the perfect place to be.
Well, congratulations on that. That's amazing stuff to continue to do that and read that. And CW gave me a couple of the new songs that you've been doing, and they're really good. They're really good. It's Only Money. I really like that one a lot. Swamp Song and Up to Here. Those were my 3 favorite of the 4.
I'm not sure Up to Here has been released.
They are all coming soon. There's an album that's been done for a little while, but we were still tweaking it and fiddling with it, and it's finally been mastered, and I think it'll be out before the end of the year.
Excellent.
And It's Only Money and Swamp Song will be on it, but there's Up to Here will be on it.
What about Zenith?
Yeah, that'll be on it.
You allowed me to hear that about 6 years ago, I think it was. Or
Was it that long?
5 years ago.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it was at least 5 years ago, I can tell you.
My goodness.
Every time I've run into you, I'm like, John, when are you going to release it? When are you going to release it? Because it's just, to me, it's just kind of, it's like the heart and soul of Dramarama, and it's such a great rockin' song that is really, to me, it's like an anything. It's just so catchy. And it's such a great song. So I'm really looking forward to having that out there and having you guys, put out another album.
Well, the thing about that and why it's taken so long, I think we've come full circle. When we first came out, we just wanted to put our own record out. And at the time, to put your own record out, it required a large amount of sweat, blood, sweat, and tears. You had to go to a manufacturer and have them make a record. You had to get it pressed, and you had to go to the printers and get the,
you had to have financial support.
Well, we put our own money into it at first, but it was something that you had to do, and not every band could do it. Now, I like to say that back then there was a couple hundred bands selling 1 million records. Now there's 1 million bands selling a couple hundred records. The advent of the internet and technology makes it so anybody can put their music out and anybody can make their records. So didn't want to just be one of the million, just so we wanted to hopefully have a little bit of something behind us to help us make, at least get noticed again, and so it's taken us a while to find someone, a company that was willing to take a chance. So now, instead of just doing it ourselves, we're doing it with help from a company called Pasadena Records.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so as far as distribution and stuff like that, I mean, it's easier in a way because you have the internet these days. But, if you put all your stuff on the internet, you're not going to make any profit on that. And that's probably got to be really frustrating for an artist who writes songs and you think, oh, wow, this song is really good. And then you have other people tell you, this song is really good. And then it's like, it's out there and, I'm sure you expect people to love it as much as you do. And it's just got to be frustrating, this whole business. But then if it takes off, it's great.
I think we got spoiled by having songs on the radio and having a quote unquote a career of some sort. So yeah, you want people to listen to it. You want people to say, hey, that's good. When I write a song or when the band puts together a record, we're trying to make music that's as good or better than anybody else. And we're not trying to necessarily sell 1 million, but we try to make a record that's, that we're proud of. Yeah. And that people will like. So that's part of it. And it is frustrating when you put all that time and effort into it and it goes unnoticed. I don't know. It's got to be difficult for bands who, you look at guys like Paul McCartney or The Who or whoever puts out a new record now and Nobody plays it on the radio.
Yeah.
Who's playing the new Bruce Springsteen on the radio?
Nobody that I know.
Not,
I haven't played one single, and it's a great album.
It is. No, I'm not saying it's not a question of whether or not it's great music. It's just a fact that no one wants new music from old bands.
It's sad.
It kind of is.
I feel like with U2, I'm a major U2 fan, and their last two albums, Innocence and Experience, I thought were some of the best of their writing that Bono's ever done, and creatively some of the best stuff. But not everybody agreed with me. I mean, it was an album that wasn't really played much on the radio. You go see the shows and, they have the major screens and it's a way of keeping the audience entertained. But it's just got to be frustrating to know when, you're still so creative and, it's just that, I guess, getting that nod, that appreciation of, I'm still good at what I do. Mm-hmm. And I guess the most important thing is that you still get it from you, that you still enjoy it.
Yeah, well, absolutely. It's self-satisfaction is a big part of everything, and it's hard to explain or to understand, even for me, to understand at what point, it's not just mental masturbation or just like, look at me, I wrote a song, I wrote a poem and I set the words to music, and how much of that is just ego and being real full of yourself, being real pretentious. But at the same time, it's like
not everybody can do that.
No, and so it's hard to be humble and it's hard to keep that line going and come across as genuine. And I think that's what's important to me, is trying to maintain being genuine and being authentic and really caring about what we do. And we do. And as the years have gone by, we've improved as a live band, and we've also taken more into consideration the fact that people have come and bought tickets and spent money to come and see you, and really how lucky you are to have that opportunity, and how much you owe the audience. Back when I was drinking and using, I didn't care. I was like, I'm a rock star, and you're gonna get what I that whole Jim Morrison head of if I'm falling over drunk, that's what you get tonight. Luckily, that doesn't happen anymore.
I think one of the things that I appreciate when I watch you guys play is the way you approach the stage when it's time to start the show. I mean, the band is up there, they start playing, but you're in back of the audience for many of the shows, and you walk literally through the audience, and it feels like you're giving appreciation. And you're shaking hands, and you're, as quickly as you can, you're saying hi, but you're appreciating all those people that came out to see you. To me, that's really magical that you give so much of yourself, not only in singing, but just in that presentation.
Well, I think, like I said before, smoke and mirrors and make-believe is a lot of showbiz. And I'm just like everybody else. I'm not hiding backstage and trying to create this illusion of a rock star who I should be. I'm just like everybody else. And I come from that. I come from the audience because I came from the audience, and that's where I used to be in the audience before I ever was up on stage. So yeah, that's part of it. It's not necessarily trying to be like, oh, I'm so, how cool am I? I can just be with the little people, because they're not little people. They're just like me, and I'm just like them, and not trying to build an illusion or try to be something I'm not.
That's great. So let's talk about the band now. You got yourself and Mark Englert and Peter Wood. Did you all grow up together?
Yeah. Mark and I have known each other since we were babies. Literally, we lived not next door, but there was one house between our houses. As soon as we were old enough to meet the kids on the block, he was my best friend. When I learned how to dial a phone, his number was the only phone number I probably knew for a long time. I remember going and knocking on his door and his mom saying, "Oh no, Mark's gone to kindergarten," and I didn't know what that was. So, I've known Mark my whole life. And Peter, I met when we were like 12 or 13. We all graduated from high school together, and Chris went to the same high school as us, but he was a couple years ahead of us. And I met him at his record store, because he had the cool record store, the Cool Bowie record store, and I started hanging out there. And we grew up together. We're not the kind of band that had auditions for players. We just kind of grew up together. And then after the band broke up in the 90s, I took a couple of years off, and then when I put the band back together, I found the guys who were still playing with me as the bass player and drummer. Mike Davis is on bass, and Tony Snow's on drums.
Yeah.
And they're the new guys, but they've both been with me for more than 20 years.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
I got to say, it's still a great group. And I think one of the things is I kept listening to the music when I was getting ready for this, and I couldn't hear the alternative anymore. It just felt like this is just good rock and roll.
No.
I remember when Anything came out, and I'm like, oh, that's a new wave band, so we're going to put them in this category over here. And now I listen to the music, I'm like, it's just great rock.
Yeah, it was on a modern rock radio station at the time, but we always played just guitar and rock,
Yeah.
It was never new wave with the synthesizers and the drum machines or anything. I know what you're saying. Yeah, it's just,
It's just good
we
music.
started with Beatles and Stones and still go back to that.
Who's the one musician that you looked up to that you met that disappointed you the most, and then the one that made you just such a believer again?
I don't know. I no one's really ever disappointed me that I've met that I can think of. But and yeah, I don't really have an answer for that. I can't think of anybody that's disappointed me, and I can't think of anybody that's blown me away. Well, I'll take that back. I go back east most years and do this thing called Light of Day, which is a Parkinson's charity. And Bruce Springsteen was coming every year and coming out and playing with this guy Joe Grishecki.
Oh, Joe. Yeah.
And he came out, play at a small theater, and he'd come out and, he wouldn't just come out and do one or two songs. He'd come out and play for like 90 minutes with the Joe Grishecki band. And he'd also get up with a couple other bands and just show up. In fact, one time I was playing acoustic songs doing acoustic songs in between the rock bands, and Bruce was on right before me, and he was singing with this other guy, and I had to follow that. So
Bruce opened for you.
yeah, right.
That's nice.
Yeah, but it's also how do you follow Bruce Springsteen?
Just be honest and real and do what you do.
But he was really cool, and he was really just regular, down to earth guy, and I think he's a genuine, humble guy who's considering all that he's accomplished and achieved. He really is genuine, and that's hard to do.
It's true. Yeah.
But as far as anyone disappointing me, nobody really. I can't think of anybody that I've met that disappointed me.
I got to ask about the hat.
It's an alternative to toupees.
It's not as fluffy.
No, it's when my mom passed away, she was really into cowboy movies and Roy Rogers and stuff, and I started listening and watching and reading and kind of absorbing all that old Wild West stuff. Mm-hmm. So between that and also if you look at rock and roll and playing music, rock and roll has kind of lost its luster in the mainstream. You watch the Grammys or the American Music Awards, and there's not a lot of rock and roll left. You're lucky if you get one rock band in the whole 3 hours, Foo Fighters mostly, or U2 or whatever, but it's all about pop and hip hop, and it's just a thing of the past, So I sometimes feel like a cowboy in the world of automobiles. It's a number of things.
Yeah. Oh, it suits you.
Yeah, it's just a hat.
All right, John, this is like the speed round.
Okay.
So you got to pay attention because there's a timer, and we only have like another 3 hours on this machine to record. So what was the first concert you went to?
I saw the Dictators, who opened for a band called the Good Rats. They opened for Styx. And the top band was a band called Bebop Deluxe.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my God. I remember them.
Yeah.
It was at the Capitol Theater in Passaic, New Jersey. And Styx opened up for the Bebop Deluxe. And
wow.
Right before Grand Illusion took off and Styx became very popular.
Wow. That's great. What was your first album? Purchase or stole, if you stole it from Chris
Meet
Carter.
the Monkees.
Okay. That was mine, too. Who would you want to meet that you've never met?
Nobody really. I'm not big on. I've had the opportunity to meet people and kind of like shied away from it because I'm kind of bashful and I don't want to be pushy or No, nobody.
Okay. You play guitar, piano, harmonica, cowbell, anything else? Any other instrument that you would like to?
No, I was a drummer originally. I played drums. In fact, I played drums on some of the earliest Dramarama recordings. I played drums on a couple of songs on the first album. When we started the band, it was just me, the bass player, and Mark, the guitar player, and I was the drummer until it was time for us to play live, and then we had to find somebody.
Were you drumming and singing at the same time, or were you
just? It was all in the studio, so I would play the drums, and then I would sing.
Then you could do it.
You could overdub it.
What was the craziest thing that ever happened on tour?
Too many to think of, but it probably had something to do with narcotics and getting robbed at gunpoint or something like that. But nothing.
Oh, nothing
serious.
No, nothing to be proud of. Nothing to be proud of.
I didn't have any money on me, so it wasn't serious.
No, nothing to be proud of. Well, no, that happened, and then I they took my money, but not my ATM, so I had to go to the ATM and then come back. You got to score. You got to score. So yeah,
wow,
genius.
What's one message for your fans? What would it be?
Thank you.
I figured it was going to be that.
Yeah, no, seriously, that's I realize how many bands there are and how many songs there are, and the idea that I'm still doing this 35 years after starting the band in the basement of Looney Tunes record store in Wayne, New Jersey is nothing short of a miracle.
That's great. Well, awesome. Thank you, John.
Thank you so
very much.
No, my pleasure.
Do you have any questions?
No, I do. I'm curious. Now, when you do this, do you have 4 tracks so you can
We could plug in a guitar.
No. What I mean is when you're playing it back, can you shift the levels of the different voices?
Yeah.
Okay. So if I was whispering or
if as long as I know what I'm doing in my editing.
Yeah. So that's cool.
In my part of my new job of learning how to edit. So yes, it can be done. Can I do it well? Not yet, but that's what, I can't sing either, and I keep trying that.
You learn by doing.
Exactly.
Very cool.
Exactly. All right.
Excellent. That was great. Thank you.
Oh, no, my pleasure.
Yeah.
My pleasure.
Well, welcome back, everybody. What'd you think, Reitz?
Actually, I love John because he was just so honest about everything. And you can just tell that he's just such a great, wonderful human being.
He is. He's a real giver. And that's what I really appreciate. It's like he'll always take time to say hi to you or stop down and focus with you and just give you that moment. And he's so, like you said, he's so down to earth and he'll just open up, talk about anything. Special thanks today to John Easdale for taking the time to come to our studio right before heading out on the plane to the East Coast. You can find more about the band at Dramarama on Facebook or their official website at dramarama.us. That's dramarama.us. It has a picture of John dancing with a carton of tabs, so you can't miss it. And check out their new song, It's Only Money, and Swamp Song, both out now. And the new album coming out very soon.
Special thanks to those rock stars that have been kind with their words by writing reviews. And that means not real rock stars like you, saying how much you enjoy and appreciate, and those that have subscribed on Apple Podcasts.
We appreciate your support. You can find out more on our website, rockandrollconfessional.rocks, or Rock and Roll Confessional on Facebook or Instagram. So that is it for this episode. Reitz, you got anything else you want to say?
Just thank you very much for your feedback, for your positive thoughts. In the season of gratitude, we thank you very much.
Tell your friends. Okay, see ya. Have a nice day. Bye.